Hello, how are you? Actually, you can't answer back unless you put in the comments, because that's the nature of YouTube. It's a one-way monologue machine, isn't it? It's not actually a dialogue or a phone call or anything. Pretty weird. Notcast 239. Today is the 11th of October, 2022, and today I'm going to be talking about the second, third, or sixth album, depending upon who you talk to. The album is called Infected. It was released on the 17th of November 1986. I know that's a very long time ago now, but I remember it. I remember the film and the album and even the VHS. One of the very few VHSs I've got. I have got nothing to play this VHS on, but I do still have it. I think the last VHS player was made in Japan in 2016 for professional purposes. That was an obsolete technology that will be gone forever shortly. So, talking about The and their sixth album, which is called Infected, depending upon who you talk to, this is either the second or the third or the sixth. Because, as I've mentioned previously, the band released a cassette called Spirits, a cassette called See Without Being Seen, which I've mentioned in a previous episode. The solo album Burning Blue Soul, which then became a The Records, the actual The album, Soul Mining, and the album that never was, Pornography of Despair. So there's 6 albums there, which Matt Johnson had recorded in about 6 or 7 years. Very prolific. This is where the I think started to slow down a little bit in terms of their creativity. Not a criticism, more an observation. Obviously, most bands in their first flush of activity, the songs pour out of them. I think Guns N' Roses wrote something like 50 songs for Appetite for Destruction. The Sex Pistols wrote all their songs in 18 months. And sometimes, all of a sudden, a band suddenly goes, that's it, it's over. Henry Rollins did it. He wrote a lot of songs, and then after about 20 years, he suddenly rang up his manager and he went, I think it's over. I haven't written it. I've got no songs. And he's probably not written a song since then. I don't know. I do miss Rollins' band, but that's not why we're here. We're to talk about The and what is now officially the third album in their canon, Infected. Infected is, I think it's a really important record, changed a lot of lives and speaks very, very deeply to me even today. This is the first release of the album. It's called the so-called Torture Sleeve, because the actual finished artwork, the one that's on the CD and on the VHS, wasn't ready at the time they had to send the sleeve to print. So they took this photograph from the Infected film, also available on VHS, and put some anti-dog artwork through it so that the album would make its release date. Now it's a cannily titled limited edition. At the time, it was just a race against time, really. This is a brilliant album, really important to me, and an album that actually I listened to today, and I heard and saw things in it that speak to me as much now as they ever did. The album was controversial when it came out, and the reason it was controversial is because obviously it's called Infected, and it's according to the Sun, which said ban this bad taste AIDS disc in December 1986. Thought of it as a moral panic alongside Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax, and other records which aren't anywhere near as scary as you might think. This is a record that, for me at least, addresses the elephant in the room, the elephant being AIDS, the elephant of the decline and late stages of capitalism, disaster capitalism. It was the most obviously political their album that had been written to date, and it's an album that I think formed my politics a little bit. I'm going to try and keep politics out of it, except in an abstract form, but it is going to seep in at the sides, so forgive me for that. So I have to set the scene a little bit. Late 1986, when this album came out, I was a 13-year-old boy. I had hair in places I hadn't had hair before. I'd become aware of sex and relationships and politics. My first political memory that I distinctly remember is the gotcha headline from the Falklands War in 1982, when the wonderful British had sunk a Argentinian battleship and therefore killed hundreds of people. The Sun, in its crass fashion, went, "Gotcha." Nothing about the horrors of war, just, "Ha, we gotcha, mate. Ha 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 ha, you guys are dead." Um, the Sun, of course, is a reprehensible paper that has no sensitivity whatsoever, as seen by later headlines. My other major second political memory was this early 1984, walking through Cottridge High Street in Birmingham and seeing people that were at a collection table for the striking miners who were starved and not being paid for their work as a result of the miners' strike. And I kind of, living in the idealistic land that I did as an 11-year-old, I kind of thought it was incomprehensible that one of the richest economies in the world would have people that were starving and in absolute horrible destitute poverty because they wanted to work and they couldn't, and they were fighting for their jobs. And that formed my opinions a little bit. I always see there's two types of governments. There's one that protect the powerful from the people, and there's one that's to protect the people from the powerful. And the Conservative government in the 80s, I did not like them at all. Very definitely seemed to be into protecting the powerful from the people element. There was a sense in the 80s, for me at least, and obviously when you're young and you're idealistic and adolescent and you come into the world and you think, "Oh, now I see the world for the way it really is," and all the adults are visionless zombies that can't, fight against the system or whatever. Over time, I've become a lot more nuanced in my understanding of the world. But at the same point, the core ethical considerations that I have around the world and how it's constructed remain exactly the same. The mid to late 80s, when this album was released, felt like some kind of death spasm of late stage disaster capitalism. And that sounds very flippant. We were living in the age of moral panics, where sex is death and war are the new gods, where what we had was a homogenic Western cultural and religious dominance of culture. There was no diversity of thought. Everything was white dudes that were saving the world from the evil Ruskies in all the movies, called with names like Red Dawn and Top Gun and shit like that. And there was also an element of, I perceived very clear religious hypocrisy, that people thought, well, if you just read the Bible and you say that you're a Christian, then somehow that's your magic get out of jail free card for everything else that you do. And I wasn't buying that at all. I think that you have to practice what you preach, and not everybody who claimed to be religious was following the scripture. I'll put it that way. They were definitely coveting other men's oxen. I felt very trapped in the 80s. I felt like I was living in a country that I had very, very little in common with. We're living in a dog-eat-dog world. Was living in a world where parts of society were completely okay with other people starving to death because they were terrible and left-wing. And I thought we were witnessing a form of class war, actually, which was a war waged by the very rich who wanted to get very, very rich against everybody else. And I felt that the world I was in was a sea of madness, and I was trapped in the middle of it. And Infected was an album that came into that and spoke to my worldview at the time. It's an album that's around addiction and pleasure and alcoholism and sex and death and how capitalism works on that, and the age of moral panics and hypocrisy and everything that goes in. It's one of the best albums I've ever heard, by the way. It still is, in case any of you were wondering. And it was backed up with a film that was shown on British television on the 16th of December 1986 on MTV, released on VHS, shown in cinemas as late as 2016. I saw it at the ICA in London with my friend Mark in 2016, where the only version that they could screen was actually sourced through a digital transfer from a Laserdisc, because the original film stock had been misplaced by the label, which I believe is Sony. Shame on you guys. You spent a fortune on this record and you just didn't bother to keep a good quality copy of it. It's disgraceful, it really is. Um, and the themes that run through the songs on the film are exactly the same as the themes that run through the album. So the film, you can't really experience Infected without also experiencing the film. And the fact that the film is out of print and has not been on any format apart from VHS and Laserdisc for the past 30 years is quite baffling, really. I think the Others back catalogue has been very, very poorly handled by the respective label, being Epic, which I think I will get to when I get to a later episode talking about um, the themes that run through the album and the themes that run through the film are broadly exactly the same. The album opens with the title track, Infected. The film is a journey set in the same place that I think the Klaus Kinski film Fitzcarraldo was shot, about a man versus nature. And it's a thematic kind of series of interstitial pieces, the whole film. It's more impressionistic. It reminds me very much of trying to watch Koyaanisqatsi, but with lyrics, actually, because what you're dealing with is themes as opposed to a narrative. And it starts really with a man strapped to a chair and on a boat in the middle of a desert, or more correctly, in the middle of a jungle. And it always reminds me of the journey of the Heart of Darkness. The start of it is the boat going upriver, taking you into madness. And Matt Johnson obviously plays the narrator, being the vocalist, the songs that he sang, and he's strapped in. And to an extent, it feels like he's when you're dealing with pleasure addictions, and the album is very clearly around, amongst many other things, the perils of addiction and hedonism. It feels like when he's strapped into that chair, he's strapped into the addiction, and he has to go on a ride whether he likes it or not. And it's a compelling image which comes back at various points throughout the film. The second one is that there's almost an element of the film being almost a travelogue through hedonism in the face of late stage capitalism. It's around self destruction as entertainment. So the first film features Matt kind of going through an experience. He's sat strapped in next to a plane, which ties in with the song Sweet Bird of Truth. He's on an operating table. He's treated by doctors. It's almost as if self-destruction, because it's presented in quite a glorified fashion, almost like a horror movie. It's about self-destruction as entertainment, really. So there's a whole bunch of images that are going on in the film that make the songs work. Infected as a song, by the way, I should point out, is, in my opinion, a really powerful song. So in the 80s, for those of you who weren't around then, great music, terrible haircuts, bad trainers. There was a whole kind of moral panic around AIDS and HIV, the idea that only gay people got AIDS, and that it was called the gay cancer by some people, and that once you got it, it was incurable. You were doomed to die in a horrible fashion, and the concept there around, tying in with the religious hypocrisy of the moral panic, the idea that sex automatically equates to death, is that you have to be careful, no sex until marriage, any of that stuff, no promiscuity. It tied in very, very nicely with the degree of religious control. Some people thought of AIDS and HIV as God's plague that had been descended upon the filthy gays for the terrible things that they were doing, and it was their just deserts, and it was God passing punishment upon them. And then this whole album takes the concept of that and ties it into the self-destruction of hedonism. It's a very powerful set of images which we're dealing with there, and I don't think I know of any contemporary record made in the 80s. There was Pet Shop Boys, It Couldn't Happen Here, for example, but there were very few records that really addressed the horror of that, of seeing, your friends and your lovers falling away one by one and wasting away and becoming ghosts in front of your very eyes. And there's the lyric in Infected, where he sings about, let me see if I can find it. When desire becomes an illness instead of a joy, and guilt is a necessity that's got to be destroyed. The idea that desire is an illness, that instead of a joy, it becomes a thing that could kill you. The idea that sex could be death, pleasure could be death, doing something that doesn't fit in with a moral code that's ascribed to you could actually be your doom. Very powerful set of images there. And there's just a whole kind of idea there that pleasure in some form is inherently bad for you. As Prince sang, "Feels so good, it's got to be a crime." But Infected is, a title track that sums up a lot of the feelings that sit around the rest of the record, and it sets its stall out very, very quickly. You're strapped in, you're going on a ride, and pleasure could be your destruction. Almost appetite for destruction, even, which of course will be a future and upcoming Notcast when I talk about Guns N' Roses' debut LP. But Infected to me was a very formative record that really it made sense of a world that didn't make a huge amount of sense to me. It really did, because I listened to it and I thought, am I the only person that sees the world the way that I do? And then I heard this record, and it wasn't a sense of it telling me what to think. It was more, it was thinking the way that I was thinking. It was seeing the world the way I was seeing the world. And yeah, when you're young and you have full of ideas, you can look at the way that things are happening around you, and you can kind of go, I think things could be different. I think things could be better. And that was what Infected did for me, as it spoke to me and was almost comforting in so much as going, no, you're not quite as alone as you thought you were in your perception of the reality that is all around you. So the second track on the album is Out of the Blue, Into the Fire. And that song is, on the film at least, it's quite vulgar. The lyrics actually are quite vulgar. There's a terrible line about, I think I'm going to have to read it out because it's so crass, actually. So there's one about she was lying. Hang on a minute, let me see if I can find it. Where is it now? Something about I was going through the motions, feeling the emotions, and she was, squealing like a suckled pig or something. And I was just like, awful. It really is. Maybe that's on one of the other songs. But I'm sat there, and I think that sex and intimacy is something that should be not anything that you should be ashamed of, but it should be something that happens between the people that are in the room. It's not something that you should necessarily be open about, because it's that the most naked and exposed that a person is when they're going through that moment, and it's just. So there was this lyric: she was lying on her back with her lips parted, squealing like a stuffed pig. I was going through the motions, faking the emotions, and wriggling around like a lizard in a tin. And I was just like, you didn't. That's a lyric that I would have left on the cutting room floor, because obviously then it ties in with the concepts around lust and danger, and transparency and hedonism and all that. But at the same point, you kind of go, do you really need to be that graphic about it? I'm not a prude at all, but I do think that it's a thing that should be reserved for the people that are in the room, and not necessarily something that should be on a best-selling LP. I'll put it that way. The idea of I think about Out the Blue and Into the Fire again kind of addresses the concept of desire as an illness instead of a joy, a compulsion, an addiction, a thing that you can't really escape, and its shadow will cast itself over everything else. There's a really powerful line in the song, which he says, I was trying so hard to please myself, I was turning into somebody else. It always reminds me of a thing that Lemmy said, which is around there was a point where I stopped taking a drink and the drink started taking me. And if you've ever had, any addictions or any compulsions or any issues with knowing when to say no, that is very definitely how it feels at the time. Is that when you're trying so hard to please yourself, you end up becoming somebody else, somebody that you're not. That's not who you really are. Now, Kevin Smith. Well, I didn't think I was going to do this, but Kevin Smith, in one of his An Evening with Kevin Smith DVDs, said that about an addiction that a friend of his had is, what if the person he really is the addict, and we're actually trying to deny him his true self? Which I thought that's a very interesting way of looking at addiction and compulsion. But at the same point, if your addiction and your compulsion is a thing that is like a cancer, and cancer, of course, loves growth, like the current Conservative Party, it comes to the point where actually it kills the host, and then there's nothing to grow into, so to speak. So, Out of the Blue, Into the Fire is a song that I think I see some resonances with my life, my abilities or inabilities to refuse certain forms of pleasure. And yeah, there were certain times when I ever did it, and I thought, this isn't who I am. This isn't who I enjoy being, and these aren't the values that I want to reflect. You know, it was affecting my health and my ability to have good, stable environments, for example. So there you have it, with Out of the Blue and Into the Fire. By the way, there are 2 songs on the VHS which have different mixes on to the LP. Out of the Blue, Into the Fire is the first one, and The Mercy Beat is the second. So what we have then is the third song, which is Heartland, which is the first and biggest single from the album. It's not on CD. Here it is on 12-inch, and the lovely and cheerful Andy Dog Johnson artwork on the 7-inch. This is, I think, the other's biggest hit. It got to a grand total of number 29 in the charts, and it's very, very clear that Matt Johnson said in an interview that it was attacking working class Tories who think that, you know, the UK is on a par with some other countries. That's that feeling of British exceptionalism that exists. What we've seen over time is that the United Kingdom has frankly become neutered on the world stage. It has weakened its position by becoming enthralled to money from foreign countries, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what it has done is it's effectively become like one of the money laundering capitals of the world. Britain is more corrupt now than it was 30 years ago, and London has become an economic vehicle for other people to get and stay richer than they ever need to be. And Heartland, with its chorus of "This is the 51st state of the USA," is very, very clear around the cultural homogeny that exists, the fact that American culture dominates everything, and the fact that the United Kingdom is not as amazing or as exceptional as it once thought it was. It is a powerful song around power and industry and capitalism, and how the fact that really capitalism doesn't really care about what it does as long as it's profitable. In the film Jack Reacher, starring the Tom of Cruise, the bad guy played by, I think it's Werner Herzog, with his wonderful accent, said, "Well, we went into construction. You know, he's like a lead criminal mafia guy," and Tom Cruise goes, "Well, why have you gone into construction and not drugs?" And he's like, "Construction's more profitable. That's why we've done it. We can make the most money that we can out of it." Capitalism doesn't care about borders, it doesn't care about taxes, it doesn't care about ethics or morals, it cares about making the quarterly sales figures. And Heartland is very much a song about what happens when the country and the flag doesn't actually mean very much, and your country becomes merely a vehicle by which people achieve success and riches. On the B side of the Heartland single is one of the very, very best the songs, which I don't think is on CD yet. It's called Flesh and Bones, and in my opinion it should have been on the album. It's just an amazing song about living in a decrepit London that's slowly falling to pieces. It's probably on YouTube actually, so find it if you can and enjoy it. But I mean, you look at that, and you know, there's the bottle of alcohol, there's the UK with its eye replaced with a flag, and there's almost like, you know, the British pig there, or the lion, depending on your point of view. And there's that whole sense of that Britain is not that nationalism itself, frankly, is bunk, I think, I'll put the technical term. It ties in with the religious allegories and imagery that we've got in a couple of other songs that are on the album, which I will move to shortly. So, side 1, track 4. Last track on side 1. Infected is only an 8-song album, but it doesn't need any more than 8 songs. It says everything that needs to be said in that time. It is a song called Angels of Deception. Now, Angels of Deception has quite an interesting video that goes with it, that ties in with some of the themes that we had earlier on around the themes that appear in Out of the Blue, and Infected around desire. Now, for the old cliche, what goes up must come down. So for Infected, Angels of Deception is the come down, really. It's the flip side of stuff like Duran Duran and Motley Crue and all those other stuff. Those bands that were like, well, what you need is a supermodel and a yacht and everything is going to be perfect. Angels of Deception is quite a gritty reverse of that, a negative image, with sex as destruction and not celebration, promiscuity as desperation to prove self-worth, as opposed to being, just too bloody gorgeous for anyone to resist. That type of stuff. It's a powerful song, and it also it breaks the visual style. So the 3 songs previously were all live action depictions of obviously stylized events, being at a journey upriver into the heart of darkness, an encounter with a bad woman what done me wrong, or as Heartland is, the industrial beating heart of the UK. Angel of Deception moves into stop motion and puppetry and things like that as well. And you suddenly, it kind of throws in a layer of, because it repeats some of the imagery from the other songs, you then move into the concept of, so these images, they're actually avatars or representations, they're not the real thing. And it's a very interesting approach to the song, which makes the song richer and stronger. We go over to side 2 now, by the way. So turn the record over. And the first single to be released from the album, although it was deleted on the day of release because of an attack by American powers in Libya. This is the 1987. This is the reissue, actually, of that particular version, with a slightly different catalogue number. A song that they've opened their concerts with for a very long period of time, "Sweet Bird of Truth." This is a very political song. It picks up the themes from the Heartland title track, and also the imagery from the Infected album track itself on the video. Sweet Bird of Truth are around apparently the dying thoughts of an American airman as he does a late night bombing raid over a foreign country and sings 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm the last person in this plane still awake. I can almost smell the blood washing against the shores of this land that can't forget its past. It's a very political song about the use of war as an extension of ideology. So when I was talking earlier about Western cultural dominance and hegemony, the lack of films that don't have pale, stale white males in, the lack of films that have a diversity of thought. Sweet Bird of Truth is very clearly a gun aimed at the cultural dominance of America. Now, I've been to Chicago. That's not worth showing off about. It's more a kind of thing where you go, when I watch The Matrix or when I watch films that are meant to be set in other places, and you kind of go, I've been down that street. I know that road. That's Chicago. If you think about even the shape of houses that we have in places like Norway or Northumberland, for example, or Nigeria, those are not houses or roads or streets that you'll see in the vast majority of films. The vast majority of films are made and set in America, in American streets, with American roads, American houses, American street signs. And so I remember when I went to America for the first time, and I kind of felt like I've walked into a movie. This isn't actually real. Whereas you see very, very few films that actually address what it's like to live in the UK in a tangible and real fashion. One of the very few films I've seen that really shows what it's like to live in a 2 up 2 down in Nottingham, for example, is Ben Wheatley's fantastic Sightseers. But it's a kind of film that if you were in America, you'd go, people really live in houses that small with that shade of beige on the wall? Really? How does that doesn't make sense? How boring! And then we end up watching things like Paranormal Activity. Going, our houses are fucking huge. They're the size of football pitches. It takes 20 minutes to walk from the garden to the other thing. Whereas, as Chumbawamba said, ugh, your ugly houses. But that is a kind of thing where you've been dealing with a cultural dominance and a lack of diversity in thought and experience. Sweet Bird of Truth is a song that's very clearly about the way that war and the industrial machine kind of rolls on to try and dominate and control thought. It is a song around Middle Eastern politics. It's around the fact that America will overturn elections it doesn't like. It's a song about the concept of living in a world where everything is the same. Everywhere is a market. Everywhere can be turned into an opportunity for profit. Every square inch of the planet can be monetized. And this is a kind of like the idea of a guy who's basically cannon fodder, kind of thinking as he's flying in a plane high above the world, going, I don't think this is right. There's something that's wrong here. There really is. This also was, by the way, the first The CD single, which is in the other room, and so therefore I'm not going to get it, because that involves me walking out and you staring at an empty spot for a few minutes, which I think you deserve better than that. So, the CD single, which is backed with 2 tracks, Harbour Lights and Sleeping Juice, instrumentals recorded for a show called The Night Watchman. And on the CD single, you also get the 12-inch mix of Soul Mining from the promotional 12-inch single, which I mentioned in the previous episode. Sweet Bird of Truth, the classic. But of course, if you don't know or like anything by the, it doesn't really matter. In fact, if you don't know or like anything by the, how come you've made it half an hour into this? I don't know. So we have track 6 on your LP and your CD. This is the final single to be released from the album, Slow Train to Dawn. So here's the 12-inch of Slow Train to Dawn, and there's the come out now. There's the 12-inch and the 7-inch of Slow Train to Dawn, which is backed with I don't even know what's on the back of Slow Train to Dawn. Actually, I'm going to find out. Let's find out. So it is backed with The Nature of Virtue, which is taken from the Pornography of Despair LP, and Harbour Lights, again an instrumental which I think probably appears somewhere in one of the TV shows. And as you can see, Andy Dogg's artwork here is never particularly happy. It's a distinct visual style, but it's not exactly sunshine and rainbows, is it? And it's quite close to the edge, so you can imagine some shops would have had difficulty with the cover there, showing an exposed nipple, or perhaps the sleeve for the Infected single, which pulls out from what is basically a masturbating devil. The first pressing of it showed the rest of the body with the genitals clearly engorged and on display, but I didn't have that one because I was building my record collection up one record at a time, and my decisions were not around, well, what's the cover? My decisions were, is it cheap, can I afford it, and will it fit in my pocket money budget? Perhaps still the same decisions I make today. So Slow Train to Dawn comes back to one of the themes that we've had in the previous songs, Angel of Deception, Out of the Blue, and Infected. It's around weakness and vulnerability and infidelity and what happens inside a relationship, and how a person becomes controlled by their addictions and their compulsions and their pleasure addictions. And as he sings, I'm just another Western guy with desires I can't satisfy, and the love I gave to you means nothing at all. And it means nothing at all because he's not exactly 100% faithful with his approach to things. It's a song about lust, it's a song about desire, it's a song about how that is actually sometimes some person's undoing. What they think they want is not the thing that they want, and the fact that they're trying so hard to please themselves, they turn into somebody else. So these are common themes and obsessions that run all through the album, around addiction and obsession and compulsion, and around what that is to somebody's identity. And it's a great song, but it's not the best, I'm afraid to say. Tim Polk, by the way, did the video for Slow Train to Dawn, and he said, I hate that one. It's pretentious and kind of stupid because it really runs around a metaphor of desire as a train that comes and runs people over. It's pretty on the nose. It's not quite at the level of Oliver Stone's school of filmmaking, but it's very blunt as a tool. So track 7 on the LP, we have Twilight of a Champion, side 2, track 3, which is, again, it addresses the themes around self-destruction and compulsion, and the fact that you're strapped in and you can't necessarily control yourself, and the infected being the metaphor for the thing that you can't control that will end up destroying you, whatever that is, be it lust, power, money, whatever. And when I watched it again today, I kind of thought it was a song about personal collapse due to hedonism, due to not knowing when you've gone too far. And you only know as an individual, if you see the line is there, let's say the line's here, right? And you don't know necessarily when you cross the line. So if you're over there, you've gone past the line. It's only when you look back you realise you've gone over the line. Everyone else can see you've gone over because they can see the things that you can't see. But to quote the great Joey Tribbiani from Friends, sometimes you've gone so far past the line you can't even see the line, and that's when you realise when you've gone too far is actually when you've gone far too far and you can't get your way back. Twilight of a Champion, to an extent, is kind of, to me, a song that addresses that. It's like, what's the point of, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? What is the point of doing all of that if you're still going to be the richest guy in the cemetery? When you've got self-destruction and there's a psychology of addiction around that, the thrill of being alive, the thrill of acceptance or power or pleasure. But there's also an element, there's a thrill of risk around that, is to go, yeah, I almost took it to the edge, but I came back. Aren't I clever? I'm amazing. I'm so good. And Twilight of a Champion is kind of going, there's a point where you don't become somebody that's living an extended adolescence. You're just very, very obviously someone that's acting their shoe size and not their age, as the prince, as Prince said in the song "The Kiss" or "Kiss." Think about a dance now. So there you have it. It's all these songs about pleasure and addiction and compulsion and overdoing it and coming back from the edge. And sometimes you don't always come back from the edge, and the road is filled with glamorous looking corpses of people that lived fast and died young. The last song on the album is The Mercy Beat. And I think The Mercy Beat is one of my very favourite songs by the mix on the VHS. Hello, I'm the VHS. You won't be able to blame me. Is different to the mix that's on the LP, because the mix on the VHS has an actual conclusive ending. The version that's on the LP fades out, by the way. But what Mercy Beat does, and the film reflects this, is about a man that's journeyed into a state of madness, who's gone too far, who's lost control with the things that tether him to the mothership, and is out there floating in space and time, and has gone so far they can't possibly come back. It's about somebody that's at the mercy of others. It's about somebody that's given into temptation, but they haven't been able to know when to stop, and they're rearing into the area of destruction. Um, and the idea that too much is never enough. There's a line around, around. Let me just think about it. I know that the water sucked up better men than me. The idea that it doesn't matter whether you think you're a good man or a bad man. What matters is if you're in the water and there's an alligator or a crocodile, you're just dinner, really. And there's this fantastic line that sits in there. He repeats the metaphor about I'm just another Western guy with desires that can't be satisfied. And so one day I asked the angels for inspiration, and the devil bought me a drink, and he's been buying them ever since. And the liquor on my tongue feels like the sea upon the sand, and he's been having me signing confessions from the shaking hands. The concept that, yeah, you've gone too far, you can't go back anymore, and you're trying to rely on the mercy of others and the mercy of the situation. You're untethered in a storm, and the only thing you can do is hold on and hope that somehow you ride it out and you get to the other end, like a man trapped into a chair at the start of the film, who's can't move and is being just driven ever forward into situations he has no control about, like you're in a video game that's a fixed rail shooter that you can't move off the line. You've got to just follow the path and hope that you make it to the end. I think Infected is a incredible record about addiction and compulsion and capitalism and the moral panics of the 80s. There is no record that, to me, apart from possibly Pet Shop Boys actually, that really captures how I felt about being alive in 1987, what I felt when I saw the world around me. I saw the madness in the area that I had, when I saw the virulent and almost unrestrained uber capitalism of Docklands and money markets, where everyone else was just an economic unit of production to be used, abused, and discarded and thrown away. What matters is that people made their quarterly sales targets, and of course, what they're doing is they're making that tolerable through giving you degrees of pleasure and alcohol and sex and music and drugs and whatever else it is. And if that's the thing that makes you tolerate the rest of an unbearable society, then that is the thing that they will sell you. I always think about a character in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy called Wonko the Sane. Wonko the Sane very much had the idea that the people inside his house were the sane people, and the asylum was everybody outside. And of course, if you think you're the only sane person in a world of madmen, then that Wonko the Sane is very possibly your god. Sorry, I didn't know I was going to go into Wonko the Sane, but there you have it. It's an album that, to me, feels about somebody that has the desire to go everywhere, to see everything, to experience everything, to see everything that's life got to offer, and before they die, without realizing that that desire to climb the mountain and to come so close to the edge means that actually that could be the thing that kills you. It's a really powerful record about the perils of that, and there is no record that to me captures the 80s quite so well. What I haven't talked about yet, there's two other things. One is the single of Infected. This features a number of tracks on it. There's the 7-inch of Infected, which is backed with Disturbed, I think it is. And there's also an Infected 12-inch that has a 12-inch mix, the Energy mix of Infected, and again another instrumental called Disturbed. If you're a particular format completist, there is an extra 12-inch of Infected that features the 12-inch mix of Infected, but the 12-inch mix of Infected is also on the original CD edition that was released in 1987, I think, just after the LP, and it features the 12-inch mix of Infected, which is an extended mix, Sweet Bird of Truth and Slow Train to Dawn in their 12-inch formats. Doesn't feature any of the B-sides. So, Flesh and Bone, Harbour Lights, Sleeping Juice, Born in the New SA, Disturbed, and the other track, the name of which I've temporarily forgotten, do not feature on this. In fact, I don't think they've been released digitally or in CD apart from a compilation called Film Music, which came out in 2002 and is super uber limited. Yeah, I've got it. I'll show it you when we get to that point in the band's lexicon. But the film, sadly unavailable officially in digital form, although you can find all the individual songs on YouTube. What you can't find are the interstitial pieces between the songs. So the film is a slightly different experience. It's the album, it's a couple of different mixes of tracks on the album. There's also kind of punctuation points of separate short bursts of 40-50 seconds of visuals and sound that kind of create the thematic visual link between the songs. So you can see the album as actually being 8 separate chapters, which is a visual kind of exploration of the obsessions and compulsions of the album. Absolutely essential viewing. Criminal it isn't on DVD. Rest your head in shame, Epic Records, for losing the master tapes. There is one last thing, which was released in 1988, which I regard to be part of the Infected era. There was a single that was released by Zeke Manyika, and what this was, it was produced by Matt Johnson, Charles Gray, presumably not the same Charles Gray who played Blofeld in You Only Live Twice, or Diamonds Are Forever, and Zeke Manyika himself. Zeke Manyika was a percussionist who played on some of the tracks. It is a single called Bible Belt. Here is the 2 12-inch releases of the song. This was music that was written by Matt Johnson, and a poem that had been written by Zeke. Zeke sang the vocals on it. Matt Johnson then also kind of edited and rewrote the lyrics, but Zeke sang the vocals and played on some of the tracks as well. And this is as a lyric, it's a powerful damnation of apartheid South Africa, and lyrics about how Jesus equals prophet and no one dares stop it. Necklaces of broken knees. Hearts will scream and brains will bleed in the Bible Belt of the Southern Veldt. Now, if you're South African, I make no judgment calls around it. That is his understanding of the environment of South Africa in the late 80s. There are 2 12-inches, despite the fact that it tells you that both of the tracks are 7 minutes 40 seconds long. This mix is 7 minutes 40 seconds long on the standard 12-inch. This mix is 6 minutes 7 seconds, by the way. This features uncredited artwork by Andy Dog Johnson. So this feels like the record with Zeke as a guest vocalist. This, of course, also does, but it passed me by at the time. If you need to understand, or if you want to be the completist, you absolutely have to listen to this track. It is kind of like the missing link between Infected and the subsequent album Mind Bomb that was released, I think, in 1989. This is a really great single, which has, I think, fallen out of most people don't even know it exists, which is such a shame because it's a fantastic track, and it's an important song in the band's existence, even if it isn't actually an official the song. This is The Others Infected, their third, second, sixth album, depending on your point of view. I have no hesitation in telling you that this would easily be in my top 100 albums of all time. It's number 99 on the now defunct Q magazine's list of the top 100 albums of all time. It might very well even be in my top 50. It is an incredible album that, to me, if I wanted to sit somebody down and go, this is what 1986 sounded like to me. It wouldn't be The Queen Is Dead or Brotherhood or Staring at the Sea or Black Celebration. I'd get infected and I'd sit down and go, this is my 1986. This is what it was like. And as an adult who has been sober for 3.5 years, who has battled with addictions and compulsions and mental health and everything else that goes with it, Infected is an album that when I listened to it today and I watched the film today, it spoke to me strongly and vividly as an adult. Best albums will travel with you through time and they will reveal new depths and new meanings to you with the passing of time. Infected is as good an album in 2022 as it was in 1986. It's one of my favourite albums and I love it to bits. I have no quality control about this. If it was awful, I'd tell you, but it isn't. I think it's a fucking great record, and it's probably my favourite The record. So that is The There's Infected. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. Don't forget to subscribe if you don't already do so. If you've got lovely things to say, there is the comments box. If you haven't, keep them to yourself. I will post up links to the videos in the comments section down there as well. Stay beautiful, take care of yourselves and each other, and hopefully I will see you soon. Okay. Bye, guys. See you later. Oh, bye, guys and gals, actually. Smell you later. All right. Bye.